Good morning. Sorry, we're having technical difficulties again. Thank you for being patient. What we'll do though is we'll start the service. If you'll please join in the reading of Sambujo, followed by Junirai. We've joined again in Sambujo and Junirai. This morning we have as our speaker, Dennis Akizuki. Please listen to his Dharma message carefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Rinban. Let's start by reciting the golden chain. Please join me in Kansho. I am a link in Amida's golden chain of love that stretches around the world. I will keep my link bright and strong. I will be kind and gentle to every living thing and protect all who are weaker than myself. I will think pure and beautiful thoughts, say pure and beautiful words, and do pure and beautiful deeds. May every link in Amida's golden chain of love be bright and strong, and may we all attain perfect peace. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Good morning. Glad you could join us. Please join me again for Gassho and reciting the Nembutsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Welcome again, and welcome everyone who's joined us for this service, either watching live or watching it later on YouTube. If you're watching us for the first time or a relative newcomer, introduce yourself in the chat section, which you will find to the right of the screen. Let us know if you'd like to learn more about Buddhism in general or Jodo Shinshu, which is our type of Buddhism. This morning, I'm going to talk about two Buddhist monks who lived in Japan more than 500 years ago. Both lived in Kyoto, and they were reportedly good friends. I think some slides, hopefully this is going to work. If we could call up a couple of slides. The first monk is one that you've heard mentioned in services many times. His portrait is one of the ones that hangs in the back of the Onaijin. His name is Renyo. He lived from the year 1415 to 1499. His portrait is located on the wall immediately to the left of the image of Mita Buddha, which is in the center of the Onaijin. Renyo is the 8th head of our sect of Buddhism and was a direct descendant of Shinran, our founder. Shinran's portrait, by the way, is to the right of Amida Buddha. So we have Shinran on the right, Renyo on the left. Now, Renyo is considered one of the most important people in the history of Jodo Shinshu, and he's sometimes referred to as the second founder of Jodo Shinshu. And he's referred to that because when he was young, the Honganji, our school of Buddhism, didn't have many followers or temples compared to other Buddhist organizations. It was in fact pretty weak. But what Renyo did is he revitalized the Honganji by bringing the teachings to everyday people in an easily understandable language. At the time, a lot of the teachings were actually written in Chinese. Buddhism came from China. So unless you knew how to read Chinese characters, you really weren't able to read some of the teachings. So what he did was he actually wrote them down in Japanese and in letters, and he passed them on to people that way. And average people, farmers, merchants, those kind of people who didn't really have access to the teachings before his time. So he's responsible for setting the Honganji on a path to becoming the most popular and influential sect of Buddhism in Japan. The second monk was named Ikkyu Sojun. He lived from the year 1394 to 1481. Some of you may have heard of Ikkyu. He is one of the most famous monks in Japanese history. So famous, in fact, that from October 1975 until June 1982, there was an animated series about him. Well, when he was young, called Ikkyu-san. There are almost 300 episodes of this series. And you want to think about that. Almost 300 episodes of a cartoon about a young Buddhist monk. In the series, Ikkyu would solve problems and issues using his wits and intelligence. One of the plot summaries I found describes the series this way. Ikkyu is a little boy training to be a monk at Ankokuji Temple, known for being mischievous and a bit of a troublemaker, but extremely smart. Ikkyu constantly thinks of new ways to outwit his frustrated teachers, helping others at the same time. In this cartoon, whenever he tries to find a solution to whatever problem or situation he's trying to resolve, he will sit in a lotus position and think about that until he comes up with the answer. So this was actually a very popular animated series in China also, where the Chinese made an animated movie about this boy monk. The anime series has a very catchy theme song, which you can find on YouTube if you want to check it out. Just check out Ikkyu-san theme song. There are many stories about Ikkyu as a boy and an adult. I found one that was told by Reverend Tatsuya Aoki of the Buddhist Churches of Canada. He titled it Change. And he said, one of the basic teachings of Buddhism is that of impermanence or change. We are able to see many changes in nature, especially now that it is springtime. Ikkyu was a famous Zen monk and poet who was a contemporary of Renyo, the eighth patriarch of Jodoshin Buddhism. Ikkyu had a very quick mind, and it came in handy for him in a very well-known story told about his youth. As a young monk, Ikkyu got himself into trouble one day when he accidentally dropped his master's teacup. This was very serious since the teacup was the master's favorite. The cup was a rare treasure, beautifully crafted from a precious clay. Of all the master's possessions, it was probably the one he cherished the most. Ikkyu felt very guilty, and before he could formulate a plan of escape, he heard footsteps approaching. He quickly swept the pieces together and blocked them from view behind his body. He turned to face the door just as the master entered. When he came within speaking distance, Ikkyu quickly asked, "Master, why must people die?" The master replied, "It is perfectly natural. Everything in the world experiences both life and death." "Everything?" Ikkyu asked. "Everything," the master said. "So it is not something we should feel upset about?" "Definitely not." At this point, Ikkyu stepped aside to reveal the shattered pieces of his previous teacup, of his master's precious teacup, and said, "Master, your cup has experienced its inevitable death." So did this really happen? Maybe, maybe not. But the intent of the story, like many Buddhist stories, is to pass on a lesson. In this lesson, it is about change and impermanence, and it's using Ikkyu's quick wit as a means to tell the story. Now, as I mentioned, Renyo and Ikkyu lived in Kyoto, and they were friends. It was commonly said they were very, very close friends. And there was a story that illustrated their friendship. One day, Ikkyu went to visit Renyo, but he found that Renyo wasn't home. So Ikkyu decided he was going to wait for Renyo and laid down for a nap. So they were good enough friends where Ikkyu saw that Renyo wasn't home and made himself feel at home. Well, he didn't see a pillow, but he saw a statue of Amida Buddha. As you know, there's an image of Amida Buddha that is at the center of our Onaiji. Well, Ikkyu, being the kind of irreverent, the mischievous person that he was, decided to use the statue as a pillow. So, remember, at this time, he was an adult, and he's older than Renyo. But again, this shows his personality. When Renyo returned home, he said, "Don't touch the tool of my livelihood." There's another version of the story, I think, tries to make this more modern by having Renya say, "Hey, what are you doing to my business equipment?" But rather than arguing and being upset with one another, the two monks just started laughing about how they viewed the same statue. It's kind of cool to hear about these two very important monks who are friends, who could be themselves around each other and kind of realize the reality of the situation. And Renya must have had an influence on Ikkyu because supposedly at the end of his life, the Zen monk said, quote, "If people ask my opinion, tell them I turn to Shin Buddhism." So there you have it, a little bit about these two very important monks, one a Zen monk, one a Jodo Shinshu monk, very good friends, who, through the stories about them individually and together, they teach us about the different lessons about Buddhism. So please join me in Gassho and reciting the Nembutsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.
Thank you, Dennis, for sharing your Dharma message with us this morning. Thank you for your work as a minister assistant. This is the first time that you are appearing with the Kesa and the MA's robe. So congratulations on your achievement, and once again, thank you very much for your Dharma message this morning. As we conclude, will you please join in Gassho and Nembutsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you, everybody. See you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye. Good morning, everyone. Sorry we're running a little bit late. Thank you for joining us this morning. We will begin with the reading of Sambujo and Sanbutsuge. As you know, Sanbutsuge is one of the two gathas that we read from the larger Pure Land Sutra. This is it contains, the larger Pure Land Sutra contains the overarching story of Jodo Shinshu, the story of Dharmakara, and the teacher that he encounters, this Buddha Lokeshwara Raja. And working with Lokeshwara Raja, makes these 48 vows and fulfills those vows and becomes the Buddha Amida. And at the core of these vows is the promise that all beings will be able to become Buddhas as well. Regardless of their abilities or skills, that everyone is assured of becoming a Buddha. This Sanbutsuge is when Dharmakara meets Lokeshwara Raja for the first time. And Dharmakara recites these verses praising the virtues of his teacher. So if you please join now in the reading of Sambujo, followed by Sanbutsuge.
在所可能所人民不言なつ不正常一概念生じ両世三昧知恵以上五世とぐむつ分野心願一切空無一切大安慶子無無つや五千の九万無量大小衆女語者供養一切死と書物分量具の検証分薬品尿語者書物世外部分案へ無種説の公明師書変死小国尿税精進偉人難量量が作物国の第一号宗奇妙道場上絶国尿内音理無と総がと愛民ドーナツ一切実法来所新熱症状意図がご経絡安穏好物神妙善が心象発願の意力少々欲人も生存知恵無下上量子孫知が信用軽量心志食の口我行精進臨終
Again, good morning. Welcome to this morning's service. It's always nice to have people joining us, although, again, there's nobody in the Hondo except for our AV and Zoom and YouTube people who come regularly to help us with making these services available to anyone who would like to view our services here at the Betsuin at our YouTube channel. And I hope you go back. If you haven't followed us during this pandemic time, take a look at our humility, and compassion. This morning we have as our speaker the person who will give this morning's Dharma message, Michael Jones. And Michael Jones, the other thing that's good about being a Zoom service, Michael Jones is not here, but he's able to share his Dharma message. And we really are able to share our Dharma message now from anywhere in the world. So again, look through the library and you might find some interesting locations from which these Dharma messages are presented. But we have with us this morning, sharing his thoughts, Michael Jones for this morning's Dharma message. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you, Sensei. Good morning. Please join me for the reading of Three Treasures. Hard is it to be born into human life. Now we are living it. Difficult is it to hear the teachings of the Blessed One. Now we hear it. If we do not realize the truth in this life, when will it be realized? Let us reverently take refuge in the three treasures of the truth. I take refuge in the Buddha. May we absorb ourselves in the principle of the way to enlightenment and awaken in ourselves the supreme will. I take refuge in the Dharma. May we be submerged in the depths of the doctrine and gain wisdom as deep as the ocean. I take refuge in the Sangha. May we live in harmony in the great assembly as disciples of Buddha and be freed from all hindrances, becoming units of true accord in the life of harmony, in a spirit of universal oneness, freed from the bondage of selfishness. Even through myriad ages of kalpas, hard is it to hear such an excellent, profound, and wonderful doctrine. Now we are able to hear and receive it. Let us thoroughly understand the true meaning of Tathagata's teaching. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Good morning again, and let me start off my talk, please, with this. So please join me in Gassho. My heart fills with loving kindness. May I be happy. May I be well. May I be peaceful. May I be free. May all beings be happy. May they be well. May they be peaceful. May they be free. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Well, again, good morning, and thank you for being with us today. The brief reading that I just did is an excerpt from the Metta Sutta. It seems particularly appropriate right now. The world today appears to be in total disarray. An unjust war is killing innocent people. The pandemic, though apparently subsiding, is still taking its toll on the world, in some areas more than others. Many states have enacted or in the process of enacting voting laws that will deter or even prevent people of color from voting. And 3 states, Texas, Florida, and Idaho, have taken aim at our very vulnerable LGBTQ population. And in the cases of Texas and Idaho, the most vulnerable of them, our transgender children. So here we sit, nowhere near the Ukraine, in a region that's loosening the COVID restrictions, in a state that has accommodating voting laws, and in a community that openly supports and shows our love for our LGBTQ members. We could refer to ourselves as privileged, and we'd be right, because we are. At the same time, we hear people telling us, and I've been one of those people telling you, that we need to take care of ourselves. We need to be grateful for what we have and what we need, and we need to express gratitude for it. We need to find what brings us happiness and joy. Some have asked, however, why should we get to be happy or joyful given all that's going on in the world? Recently, I listened to a conversation between shame researcher and author Brene Brown and author and activist Karen Walrond. They've been friends for many years and live near each other in Houston, Texas. Dr. Brown was dealing with a feeling of shame for her feelings of joy and happiness regarding things going on in her life. How, she asked, can I possibly feel joy when the world is in such bad shape? It's hard to move through the world in these times with all of these terrible things happening. Has this happened to you recently? Have you found yourself feeling really good about something that has happened in your life, only to suddenly remember how many bad things are going on, leaving you to question how you could possibly be so self-centered? Ms. Walrond has a mantra she lives by, and I quote, "I never apologize for embracing joy and beauty, even when the world is falling apart, because joy and beauty are my fuel for activism." She went on to explain that everything has a rhythm. The tides ebb and flow. We inhale and exhale. The moon waxes and wanes, and we all need to regenerate ourselves so that we can keep up with this process. Now, before someone says that I'm espousing a dualistic rhetoric here, I'd like to challenge you to think of this actually as the opposite. The Dharma teaches us that death is a part of life, and life is a part of death. There can be no light without darkness, and no darkness without light. Therefore, without the downs, there can be no ups. Without the bad times, there can be no good times. And per the title of one of Thich Nhat Hanh's books, no mud, no lotus. Thich Nhat Hanh points out that happiness and joy come through mindfulness, understanding what we have that we should be grateful for, realizing what we do not need to experience and being grateful for that as well. He reminds us that it's often our attachments that cause us pain. Attachment to the way things were, to something that we own, to someone we love, to the world as it was when we thought it was pretty good. The teaching of impermanence tells us that these conditions do not last. I mentioned that Karen Walrond is an activist and that she has several causes for which she advocates. Hence, her talks frequently take on an activist tone. Her advice on needing to find joy and gratitude, even with everything that's going on, is an example of this. She says, stopping to access joy and gratitude remind us of what we're fighting for. In her book, Braving the Wilderness, Brene Brown leverages the Buddhist concepts of strong back, think courage, and a soft front, think keeping yourself open to new information access by others. And she adds to it the concept of a wild heart. Quoting from her book, "The mark of a wild heart is living out the paradox of love in our lives. It's the ability to be tough and tender, excited and scared, brave and afraid, all in the same moment. It's showing up in our vulnerability and our courage, being both fierce and kind. A wild heart can also straddle the tension of staying awake to the struggle in the world and fighting for justice and peace, while also cultivating its own moments of joy. I know a lot of people, myself included, who feel guilt and even shame about their own moments of joy. How can I play on this gorgeous beach with my family while there are people who have no home or safety? Why am I working so hard to decorate my son's birthday cupcakes like cute little Despicable Me minions when there are so many Syrian children starving to death? What difference do these stupid cupcakes really make? They matter because joy matters. A wild heart is awake to the pain of the world, but does not diminish its own pain. A wild heart can beat with gratitude and lean into pure joy without denying the struggle in the world. We hold that tension with the spirit of the wilderness. It's not always easy or comfortable. Sometimes we struggle with the weight of the pull, but what makes it possible is a front made of love and a back built of courage. Now, it's important to realize that joy leads to resilience. You deserve happiness. You deserve your moments of joy. These moments of joy do not ease the suffering in the world, but neither do they add to it. Your happiness is not at the expense of those who are suffering, but it is a curative process to alleviate your suffering, increase your resilience, and make you more capable of lending a hand in the days ahead. Buddhism teaches us to try to see the world as it truly is. That does not mean that we need to take on the weight of the world's problems. Someone recently said, and I'm sorry I don't remember where I heard this, but that they start their day listening to a synopsis of the top news stories. They then make a list of all of the issues involved in those stories. Next, they draw a line through each issue over which they have no control. They are left then with at most one or two things that they may be able to assist with. The rest of the list is now officially off their worry list, since they can't do anything about them. If you find yourself thinking that there is no joy in the world, no beauty in the world, then please pick up your cell phone and open up the pictures file. Then just scanning through the pictures you've taken. We tend to take pictures of things that make us happy or that we find beautiful or interesting. And I think you'll find that there are many beautiful things in your world. Our world is far from perfect. Yes, there are many problems in this world, but let's remember that in Shinran's time, war and pestilence made death an ever-present reality. In Renyo's time, war and political unrest ruled the day. The earliest 20th century in Japan could have easily ended Japanese Buddhist traditions, but they managed to survive. The Great Depression of the late 1920s and 1930s brought our country to its knees. World War II saw millions of deaths and the unjust incarceration of thousands of Japanese Americans. The Vietnam War was a crisis on many levels for Vietnam and the US. 9/11 brought the unthinkable to American soil and led to a seemingly never-ending war. So yes, these times are bad, but we have the power to make them less impactful on ourselves and on those around us. Amidst the pandemic, conflicts in the world, and any number of other things, you do not need to allow your happiness and joy to be a victim. Allow that happiness and joy to be your source of power. Your happiness and joy is not just deserved, it is necessary. Please join me in Gassho. May I be happy. May I be well. May I be peaceful. May I be free. May all beings be happy. May they be well. May they be peaceful. May they be free. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda. Namanda. Thank you for your attention today.
Thank you, Michael. When we listen to others, the words of others, and when we truly listen, not just to kind of hear the words, but when we listen with our whole being, it has the opportunity to change who we are, change how we see the world, how we appreciate what we experience in the world. Your message this morning reminds us of how, we need to kind of look around and maybe not listen only with our ears, but with all of our senses to look at the world around us. We see narrow portions of it, but when we can look around, perhaps we might find or discover something that is more than what we have been seeing up until this point. Again, thank you, Michael. Thank you very much, everyone. for joining us for this morning's service. Look forward to having you join us again next week. As we conclude, will you please join in Gassho and Nembutsu? Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.